Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we are going back to a Marvel game that I didn't have on my list for 2023, but as I was thinking about it, this could be a lot of fun, couldn't it? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about Spider-Man 3 on the 360 and the PS2. Indeed, there are key differences between these versions. It was that era of superhero video games. So ladies and gentlemen, I remember when I pulled this game off a Blockbuster shelf as a wee lad after playing and loving one of the greatest superhero games ever made, Spider-Man 2. I thought, well, 3 should certainly be more of that. And I got the PS2 version. And I remember the mid that I experienced. And wait, what, you like that game? You don't like I insulted it? What, are you gonna cry? Sorry, that was the suit talking. Sorry. Well, here's some friendly advice from your friendly neighborhood Retro Rebound man. If you are looking to start buying Spider-Man video games, and I know some of you are gonna want to after this video, start now. Start now, do not wait until Spider-Verse comes out and the Spidey hype is back up again, because when No Way Home came out, the Spider-Man game prices went through the roof. You'd have to pay $90, almost $100, and at some points $130 to get your hands on Web of Shadows, to get your hands on the Amazing Spider-Man games that weren't even that good, by the way. So they are gonna go up again when Spider-Verse comes out, make no mistake. I don't know if it'll be as dramatic of an increase, but they will go up. Do yourself a favor now. They're still gonna be a little pricey, but they're not as pricey. Go get them now if you are feeling a little nostalgic for them and plan on playing them. With that, if you are new here and you are into nostalgic retrospective Marvel content, you're in the right place. Consider subscribing. Now let's whip our way through the complete box experience. Now you're probably thinking, well, they're the same game. What is the difference here? Let's do both at the same time in a 2-for-1 special. So as you can see here, the art is a little bit different. It's funny, the symbiote suit gets a lot more focus here on the back of the 360 version. The reason this is important to point out is you don't get the symbiote suit until like the later part of the game in the 360 version. The PS2 version gives it to you pretty quickly. But as they both say, every hero has a dark side, unleash it. Now for the 360, it says battle Venom, New Goblin, Sandman, and more. Wield the power of the black-suited Spider-Man, defend New York City from rooftops to subways to sewers, and master all new combat moves. And then it says on the Xbox 360, choose one of 10 storylines to play, including the movie's plot, as well as voiceover by Tobey Maguire, Topher Grace, Thomas Hayden Church, and more. Meanwhile, on the PS2 version, you have a similar vibe here, you know, battle New Goblin, master all new moves, defend NYC, wield the power of the black suit, kind of spread out a bit differently. But here on the PlayStation 2, it says, choose one of 5 storylines to play, including the movie's plot, 2 bonus Marvel villains being Morbius and Shriek, and then the voiceover part with Tobey Maguire, Topher Grace, etc., etc. And the voiceover part, let me just say, is one of the best parts of this game.
Don't call back!
Just like the movie, right? It's because there's a level of like, this is not supposed to be funny, but it is. And I just think Spider-Man 3 as a movie is one of the best superhero movies ever made. Not because it's great, but I guess it's great in its own way. Like, it's very much early 2000s, dark humor, cringe. It's just so whack that it's incredible, right? And of course, Bully Maguire is what makes the whole movie. The gonna cry, some dirt in your eye, the dance. We you know what I'm talking about, right? Like, that made that movie historic, in my opinion. And when it first came out, it was, what is this trash? But as time went on, you're like, I can't believe this exists. Like, I appreciate that Raimi trilogy so much. But the reason I wanted to fire this up was nothing more than just, I thought about how much I loved Spider-Man 2, and did I like Spider-Man 3 more as an adult than maybe as a kid? Would the same have applied like it did with the movie? As I grew up, I said, you know, this movie is just so wild, I dig it. Would the game be the same way? Well, let's crack open the manual here. This is gonna be a tough one with this costume and see what we got cracking here. And it's not much, which is why I thought the costume would be okay. I mean, look at that. There are your controls. And guess what's on the next page? Hold on, wait for it. Little bit of a blurb here, text, and it's white and black, and then combos, and then general information, and then you got a friend or foe promotion on the back here. Meanwhile, I believe the PS2 version is pretty much the same. It is, just so you all know. And then the back is friend or foe promotion again. And friend or foe is one that I don't have in my collection. Yes, it is a greatest hits, and as you can see beneath it here is actually a bonus DVD that it came with. So All these versions are vastly different. You know me, like when it comes to Retro Rebound, this channel scratches that weird itch for me of like, I have a reason now to get all the little versions with the little collectibles that came with them as often as I can, and whenever I'm aware of them, I try to do that. So that's the complete box version for both those. You may have noticed that one was 10 movie plots, one was 5 movie plots. What is the difference here? Well, I went through both of them, messing around with them, and the results were astounding, quite frankly. The first thing I want to compliment, actually, is that the web swinging in Spider-Man 3 on 360 actually felt pretty good. Like getting around the city as you got your upgrades, I really liked how you were gaining speed, gaining momentum, the release points. It didn't feel, of course, as good as Insomniac's, but it felt great nonetheless. And I was surprised by that because Spider-Man 2, what I loved about the web swinging in that game was not really the flow, but the air tricks. To me, the air tricks were just the coolest thing ever. And of course, we know now that Miles Morales has it, Spider-Man on PS4 has it, and I hope they go a little crazier with it like they did with Spider-Man 2, where you were just doing like all sorts of movements, where in like Miles Morales, you just kind of do rolls and backflips. It's like, I want more crazy poses when I'm up in the air. But the web swinging in Spider-Man 3 does feel pretty good. Getting around does feel pretty good. What I noticed was a problem was actually the camera was a little herky-jerky. Like it wants to snap back into position right behind Spider-Man no matter what. So if you want to do what you're used to doing in, say, Spider-Man PS4, web swing around, you know, take a look at the building next to you, down the street, it just immediately wants to snap back. So when you're getting around, things can feel a little, again, herky-jerky. Not crazy about that, but I gotta say the flow, getting around, was pretty good. What was also kind of impressive was you're in New York City and there were very minimal loading screens. So if there was a mission that like took you underground into the subway, it just did that. And I like that. Like it was just very seamless. You just went in, and it was funny being in a New York City where the subway systems were completely empty. As a local, I can promise you that is not the case at all. But it was funny to be in a place that was so lacking in population, even though it typically is not. Now, the reason the differences are important to highlight here is Treyarch made Spider-Man 3 on the 360, the next-gen version at the time, if you will. Vicarious Visions made the PS2 version. Now, remember what I said about Spider-Man 3 and the suit that you get coming way later in the game on PS3 and 360. Well, in the PS2 version, you got it much sooner. The reason this is important to emphasize is the whole structure of the PS2 version, I actually thought was better than the 360 version. So let's get into that a little bit. On the 360 version, you just get the suit and you have an additional move. That's really it. But for the PS2 version, it sort of carries the legacy of Spider-Man 2 in a way that I appreciate more, which is you get experience points and you get upgrades with those experience points, much like you did, as I said, in Spider-Man 2. I like that more than where Spider-Man 3 on next gen automatically unlocks them for you, and I am not crazy about that move at all. Now, what happens in Spider-Man 2 is as you use the symbiote suit more and more and more, it starts to kind of eat away at you, and there's a limited amount of time that you can enjoy it for. So while there are a lot of sacrifices, technically, and I mean, the game looks ugly, like uglier than Spider-Man 2, and that wasn't a pretty looking game, but it was doing enough special things where you could look past it. But Spider-Man 3 looks terrible on PS2. It looks really bad. And so I just couldn't help but feel so conflicted. I'm like, the gameplay and design here is better. I like the progression that's here, but the web swinging in Spider-Man 3 feels better and overall looks better. You're getting like almost two totally different design games, and it's funny because normally when we see compensation be made for older platforms, it's in the way that you saw on the back of the box, right? PS2, 5 storylines, 360, 10. Okay, makes sense. One can hold more data than the other. One can process more data than the other. Yeah, okay, like it's gonna have less content. And usually you compensate and do fun, different things to get creative with it, which is why I loved picking up tie-in games that were available on both the PS2 and the Game Boy Advance. You'd get something like Lord of the Rings: The Third Age, where you'd get this, say, turn-based RPG, but then you'd also on the Game Boy Advance get a Fire Emblem style game. You know, they had to get creative with the limitations there. Limitations breed in innovation, as we all know. So this wasn't the case here. And instead, it just, limitations led to different design elements, which is not what you see. Like, you hand them the blueprint and go, hey, we just need this, but on a smaller scale. you don't add an experience system into that. So I just find it funny, or maybe it was the opposite way, where they handed Treyarch the ability to scale up, and Treyarch was like, well, we're not gonna do the experience system, but that wouldn't make sense because Treyarch was the developers of the Spider-Man games 1, 2, and 3. So they were handling the big one, right? The 360 version. So yeah, it was interesting seeing just a difference in design here when going back to both these games. You know, I did it just for gameplay capture, but eventually I was recognizing like, they're actually two different types of games when you play them. Now the combat, you know, it was never great in these games, but what I loved again was the bag of tricks that you'd unlock in Spider-Man 2. Like you could slide on people's bodies, you could stair step up their face. That type of stuff was so legit to me. I loved it. And so with this game, again, on the 360, you're automatically unlocking it. In PS2 for Spider-Man 3, the upgrades just aren't as cool, in my opinion. So you're just losing out on both ends now, where the progression was really, I guess, fed pretty well by some cool animations, some cool moves you could do. But at the end of the day, what I loved about Spider-Man 2 was the dodging and how it worked. And what Spider-Man 3 goes for is fluidity. It goes for fluidity. So instead, like you'll hold down the dodge button and it'll automatically dodge for you. It'll slow down time. And it's kind of like your spider sense is activating. And when enemies are all attacking you at once, let's just say the game does not compensate for that. You will dodge one attack and get hit by 4. That will happen, and it is mighty unfortunate. So in this attempt to be smooth, they don't really balance the combat properly. It gets a bit in the way. It can get a little frustrating, but there are ways where you can get around it and kind of gimmick the combat. For me, in particular, when I was fighting mini bosses, I just do aerial combat endlessly. I just keep bouncing up in the air, running around, bouncing up in the air. You'd unlock super attacks eventually. Again, they tried to streamline and smooth out what I thought was a pretty deep system that let you get as creative as you wanted to. Like one of the fun things about Spider-Man 2 was the sandbox nature, right? You could hang dudes from street posts if you wanted to. That was so much fun being able to do that in that game. And I feel like that fun-free spirit is missing in Spider-Man 3. What you get instead here with Spider-Man 3 is a kind of disconnected plot from the movie, which you did get, I think, in Spider-Man 2 as well. A lot of people like to pretend that's like a full tie-in game, but I just feel like there are moments like the Mysterio part in Spider-Man 2. Where did this thing come from at all, right? It wasn't in the movie. That's what these movie tie-in games do to kind of add a little more content. And so with Spider-Man 3, at least on the 360, you get those 10 storylines. And with those 10 storylines, you get some general gang ones. You get one with like DeWolf where you can run around and help the cops out. I thought this one in particular was actually pretty interesting. Now, the reason I say that is because you actually see that similar storyline set up in Spider-Man from Insomniac. And so to sort of see, while it probably wasn't intentional, this very similar storyline in what I think is the best Spider-Man game ever, and what I think is one of the lesser flattering Spider-Man games, was actually really cool. So I thought it was neat to see that Spider-Man 3 kind of did something that I appreciated in Insomniac ahead of Insomniac, again, who made the best Spider-Man game. So beyond that, though, I mean, this is delivered in a disjointed manner. You're gonna fire open your map, you're gonna have these map markers that you can just zip to whenever you want, tackle the storylines and plot lines however you want. That freedom is what really appreciated by a lot of players, myself included, but it's just gonna feel disjointed in turn. Like you're gonna go on a lizard mission, then you're gonna beat up a bunch of gangs, then you're gonna go meet up with DeWolf, then you're gonna do, New Goblin, and then hey, after this, part 2 of the Lizard, and then part 2 of Goblin, and then some more gangs, and then part 3 of Lizard. It just is so all over the place, but I kind of dig that aspect of it. Now, more than anything, though, that I dig are the QTEs. These are so wild. It's clear that they're here to compensate for the loading screens that I said are missing, so they keep the gameplay rolling, and I think it works, even if I know what is actually happening underneath the hood. But what's really awesome about this is when you fail them. Yes, when you fail the QTEs, as I'm sure you've seen before, they're hilarious. Like when you fail the bomb defusal and the lady's like, I don't want to die. It's incredible how brutal some of these are. And so I gotta say that this game is unchained, and it just carries the Spider-Man 3 energy in a perfect way that I can't imagine was intentional. Like, I don't think when Raimi was putting together this movie, he was like, yeah, this is gonna be kind of whack. And when they were putting together Spider-Man 3, the game, they're like, yeah, this is gonna be kind of whack. But because they are so harmonized in whackness, it feels like this beautiful symphony of weird video game design that just works so well in favor of its source material. So I gotta say, I really had a blast in a weird way coming back to it, but I was also like perplexed by some of the design choices and changes. I thought what was most disappointing was definitely the black suit. I thought that the way the PS2 game handled it was a little more interesting, but where Spider-Man 3 handled it, it was like, this is just a thing. It's just a thing, and that's it. But that's why a lot of people love Web of Shadows, as we've covered on the channel. Web of Shadows, you get that black suit, and it is a thing of beauty, and you can change the story with it. It is awesome in that regard. But otherwise, the voice acting, the don't call back moment with Tobey Maguire on the phone with MJ.
No, I haven't found out anything. Don't call back.
Is fantastic. The boss fights are pretty spongy. The combat is a little whack, but there's just a charm to it. Much like what I say with Spider-Man 3, the movie, I can't sit here and be like, yeah, go play this. This is amazing. But going back to it, I'm like, yeah, you know, this is a fun time, right? This is a fun time to be a Spider-Man fan. I think it is now as well. We're getting really legitimately top tier content. And I think we did during the Raimi era as well. But this was just a fun time even for video games, where we were sort of seeing them slowly break the mold of what superhero games could be. So that's all I gotta say on Spider-Man 3, the movie video game. Let me know what you're thinking about this in the comments down below, and any other movie games you may want me to check out. With that, take great care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next Retro Rebound. Peace out.